Hello, and welcome to this special interview as part of AeroTime's one-year celebrations to mark International Women's Day. My name is Patrick Jeffson, and joining me today here at the Aviation Institute of Maintenance in Chicago is Tammera L Holmes. Tammera is the founder and chief executive officer of AeroStar Corporation, a consulting institute, and she is also the chief operating officer of global aviation consultancy Aerologistics. With over 20 years in the industry, Tammera's work includes innovation and consulting, flight and airport operations, and sustainable airport design. Her experience in the industry is matched only by her passion to inspire young people, women, African Americans, and underrepresented groups to join aviation and STEM careers. She promotes philanthropy in aviation and aerospace education through her nonprofit organization, AeroStar Aviation Institute, and I am really excited to dive into this interview and hear more. Tammera, thank you for joining AeroTime during this special occasion and to mark International Women's Day. As the father of daughters, this is a day that I'm happy to support. So Tammera, how did your aviation journey start?
My aviation journey began when I was about 16 years old. One Saturday morning, my mom made me get up and go with her brother somewhere that I didn't know. Of course, a 16-year-old having to go somewhere on Saturdays with her younger brothers and sisters was not optimal. So I had an attitude the entire way, slamming car doors. We drive into downtown and I assume we're going to the museum, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be horrible. We pull up into the parking lot, a very nondescript building, and through the building you can see aircraft on the other side, and I'm thinking, this is an airport? Right in the heart of downtown museum campus. We go inside and there's a bunch of kids just getting off school buses, and I see like people in Tuskegee Airmen jackets, and I'm like, what in the world? It's the Tuskegee Airmen Chicago Dodo chapter giving free airplane rides to kids.
Free airplane rides?
Free airplane rides. The pilot comes and said, it's your turn, you ready to go up? I say, yeah. We go out to the ramp, we do pre-flight, we get up in the air, and he asked me if I wanted to fly the plane.
Had you flown in anything before?
I had been on trips. My father worked for American Airlines, but it was never anything that I thought about as a career. Like, I was focused on the trip and like traveling. And so this particular opportunity came, I was in a very different space in my life as a rambunctious teenager, I guess you could say. And so when the pilot took me up and he asked me if I could fly the plane, my response was absolutely. I took control of the aircraft, we turned the plane around, and I was flying over Lake Michigan on the most beautiful day. And I knew then that aviation had not only changed my life, it had probably saved my life.
That's it's an epiphany, really.
Absolutely. Just months before that, probably within a year, I had gotten into a huge fight at school. I had gotten into a lot of trouble and actually gotten picked up by the police. And in the back seat of the police car, I literally heard a voice say to me, it doesn't matter how smart you are now, does it? I was an honor student, made impeccable grades, did extraordinarily well academically, but my behavior was atrocious. I basically lived a double life.
So airplanes came into your life at just the right moment.
You know what? People always said I was crazy, but then I realized that my brain was wired for crazy. And this is kind of what I talk about in my TED Talk called Get Kids High. There are literally young people who have a predisposition for high risk behavior. These are the kids that you see that are completely loose at the park, hanging upside down on the slide. Like, the slide is not for you to hang upside down on, it's for you to slide down, but their brains are wired to do something completely different and dangerous. I've run across these type of kids a lot within my journey in aviation and aerospace education, and one of the things that we do is tap into that. There are so many young people who have what they call a trauma brain, especially in urban communities, in under-resourced communities.
Because of the environment in which they've grown
Because
up.
of the environment. There are new studies out now talking about trauma-based learning, talking about how the brain is wired for hyperactivity. A lot of the young African-American males are being diagnosed with ADD and ADHD, and now they're really starting to understand the science behind trauma-based learning. And that's exactly what we've tapped into. But unbeknownst to me, I had no clue that I was doing it. All I knew is that aviation worked to cure something in me that was leading me on the path to destruction.
But aviation also led you on a path to the most amazing philanthropic innovation. I was really struck by the numbers. I heard you say, I think in your TED talk, the numbers of your school contemporaries who went to prison or to the graveyard.
When I was in middle school, my community began to change. A lot of gentrification, a lot of what we now call white flight, the mass exodus of non-minorities from the community. I saw the elementary schools and the education take a deep dive. The school books, in the beginning of the school books, you used to be able to see the people's names who had the book before you. We saw our parents, aunts, and uncles' names in the front of those books. That's how old they were. By the time I graduated high school, half of the young men that I went to elementary school with were dead or in jail. And by the time I graduated high school, another 30 or 40 were in prison or had been killed. And so it was traumatic for me, especially in high school, just being in survival mode. So when I had this aura around me as aggressive, as, bossy, as assertive, as, just didn't take any stuff, I didn't know that was preparing me for an industry that wasn't so welcoming to African American females or minorities and females in general. When you look at the demographics of the aviation industry still being more than 90% white male today. And I believe, not that it was intentional or racist or sexist, but the culture in aviation is shifting now. But when 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it was, let's just say it wasn't a welcome environment. And I didn't know that what I had learned on the streets, just a survival mentality, to be able to amplify my voice, to be able to self-advocate, to be able to put myself in positions of success that were undeniable, that people could not tell me I was not good enough because I showed up better than 90% of the people that were in competition with me. And so just the epiphany alone that aviation brought to me, the self-awareness, and again, tapping into that part of my brain that was just wired to push the envelope.
And just as aviation changed your life, you've been passionate in helping aviation change lives of young people today. And if there is a change in culture, it must be very largely because of the work of people like you.
Patrick, it's so important that the culture changes, not just for right now, but for the future of the industry. We have seen a tremendous amount of influence and impact from a diversity in thought leadership, diversifying innovation, provided access and resources to individuals who could possibly and have proven to be exceptional if they were given the opportunity. The number of young people that we have not selected, I believe they've selected us, right? The number of people that have chosen organizations like mine to help them pursue their passion is largely in part because our arms were open to them to be able to provide opportunities that they otherwise would not have.
You spoke a moment ago about brain chemistry in young people, especially young men, and their taste for high-risk activity. Now, high-risk activity is not something we normally associate with the aviation industry. How do you get that high-risk attitude and turn it into a pilot or a technician or a traffic supervisor?
The way that you use brain chemistry and the association of high-risk activity to create peak performance in aviation professionals is the same way you do it in athletics, the same way you do it for firefighters, the same way you do it for police officers. There are certain individuals whose brain are wired to be able to withstand and persist. And this is seen in children at a very young age. The chemical imbalance that happens in the brain when you're looking at norepinephrine or dopamine, you're actually looking to fulfill a high. And so you get involved in activities that actually pique that interest to fill that need. I mean, your body does the exact same thing. When you have low iron, you crave steak. When you have different things happening within your body, your cravings change with as far as what you want to eat and what you're thinking about, what activities you want to get involved in. And so, have you ever been to a sports arena?
Yeah.
Have you ever felt the energy when they're winning, when everything is going right? Nobody is up there orchestrating this. It's human connectivity. And if you know anything about aviation and aviation enthusiasts, we share a similar chemical brain makeup that is unique to people in our industry. The term aviation enthusiast was coined for a reason. When you think about the amount of young people who actually become afraid of flying planes, or fear of falling and fear of flying is the number one and number two fears that people have in life. Yes.
Along with public speaking.
Along with public speaking, which is in the top 5. When you actually get young people to the aircraft, what we have done is we teach them about the risk. We teach them about safety, and then we introduce them to the flight environment. They are much more comfortable and confident in the aircraft when they know how it works, when they know how weather impacts the aircraft, when they know how lift, weight, thrust, and drag impact the airplane, the aircraft movement in the flight environment. And so it's not just about taking risk haphazardly. It's about taking calculated and educated risk so that you receive the positive benefits and outcomes that you're looking to get. And we don't aim to scare kids, but we do aim to tap into that part of the brain that is curious and that leads them down the path of adventure. There's nothing more exhilarating, as I think a lot of us know, than flying. The first flight, taking off, landing, that literally releases adrenaline and endorphins into the brain.
Certainly when I was learning to fly, they told me that flying is safe so long as you're careful. And it imposes its own kind of discipline, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And that must be good for young people, especially young men, I imagine.
Absolutely. Well, flight imposes its own discipline in the sense that when you're on the pathway to learning how to fly, safety is paramount. Being able to pass different phases and stage checks as you go along to ensure your safety and the safety of others. But the other thing is the risk is right in front of you, right? It's not like you know about the risk of, let's say, robbing a bank, or you know what could happen. But when you're in an airplane, it's like the ground is down there, and if anything happened, it's a 100% guarantee that I'm not going to make it. And so I think the stark reality of risk, reward, and calculated, just calculated engagement with aviation is something that's built in, and that's why we train. That's why we teach. It's the same thing. My mother-in-law used to always say, "I have a healthy respect for electricity."
Well, you're still a student pilot, though, aren't you? So I must interview you again once you've done your first solo.
Yes, yes, my second solo. My first solo was in 1996, so.
Oh, you managed that. Good.
Yes, so I
Yeah.
have over 100 hours of flight time, and I did not want to be a pilot for a living, so I chose the route of aviation business and entrepreneurship. My professional background is airport planning and aviation consulting, and then I got into philanthropy and aviation and aerospace education. And now I have gotten the itch to start back flying, so I 25 years as a student pilot, and I think I'm finally going to get it done.
Yeah, but it'll make you a better pilot in the long run because you've got all that experience.
I believe so. I
and
believe
maturity.
I believe it will make me a better pilot.
Looking to the future of the industry, what sort of skills are going to be needed, do you think, over the next 50 years?
Looking at the future of the aviation industry, the skills that are going to be most important are innovation, resilience, self-starters, individuals who are persistent. Someone asked me, how do we train the aviators of the future? What type of programs do we need? And my response was, that's like asking me, how were we going to create the social media influencers and technological geniuses of the 21st century? There was no way of knowing that music was going to go digital when we were young. There was no way of knowing the type of brain that we would need or the type of skills that we would need to create digital music catalogs, to create iPods, to create digital streaming, to create music genius apps and algorithms that would pick music playlists for you. Like, how do you plan for that, right? So my response to how do we train the future of aviation is to literally grab young people when they're at the most curious. Studies have shown that the age of 10 is where most people decide that they would like to pursue a career in aviation.
And some of us don't grow beyond that much.
I don't know if I have.
Inside, some of us are always 10.
Always 10. And that's what we aim to do through training the future workforce, right? To continue to tap into that level of curiosity, the level of interest, to be able to not manufacture, but curate and facilitate the next generation of innovators.
Tammera, you focus on reaching out to all people and groups in aviation. What does inclusive aviation mean to you? And what are your plans for the Academy and aerologistics for the future?
Inclusive aviation to me means access to resources, time, mentors, opportunities that would lead to successful matriculation into the corporate arena, particularly in aviation and aerospace jobs. Inclusivity is not just being there, but it's being a part of the conversation, a part of the decision making, a part of the innovation and thought leadership as a team member, and not just having a seat at the table, but having a voice at the seat at the table. Aerostar is focused on training, educating, exposing, and employing the next generation of diverse aviation professionals. Our goal is to target young people as early as kindergarten through career to teach them about aviation careers when it comes to not just pilots, mechanics, flight attendants, but our goal is to focus on the student. So say, for example, a young person loves to draw. They love to draw buildings. Why can't that young person think about becoming an architect or an engineer in aviation? Why do we have to say that aviation is only pilots and mechanics? If it's a young person that's into graphic arts, graphic design, most of the jobs that young people want to do, they can be employed doing those jobs within the aviation industry. Even pilots, you can do air cargo, you can do corporate, you can do charter, you can do commercial. There's a lot of different pilot jobs that you can have. You can do helicopters. And so our job is to make sure that we focus on the kid and get young people give young people the opportunity to find themselves in aviation.
Finding themselves in aviation, I love that idea.
Yes.
Do you feel that, here we are 2022, this is a unique moment in the history of aviation?
I believe 2022 is a unique moment, not just in aviation, but for the industrialization of the world. We have seen, and this is International Women's Day, we have seen the impact of women in the workplace. We've seen the impact of diversity in the workplace. We've seen the call for the future of aviation to be more robust, to be more innovative. New airports, new spaceports, new vehicles, new flight vehicles, new spaceships, Mars colonization, interplanetary travel, air taxi, advanced air mobility, customer infrastructure, customer experience at new airports. The work that we do at Aero Logistics is specifically geared and catered toward the future of the industry. What does that look like? Not just the people and the places, but the infrastructure and the innovation that needs to take place for the next 50 years. We are going to see a transformation in the way we travel. And we went from supersonic travel in the 70s to just commercial travel, but supersonic travel, intercontinental, is going to happen again in the next 5 years. I believe it.
You partnered with Kenyatta Scott in 2020, and one Chicago-based network referred to you both as two lights at the end of the tunnel.
Wow.
What do they mean? And tell us more about your work with Kenyatta.
Kenyatta Scott and I co-authored a book titled Violet Takes Flight, about a young African-American girl and her dad and her younger brother who's taking their first flight over to visit her stepmom at a work conference. And they get on the plane and Violet is so afraid, but she gets through it. Moral of the story is to do it afraid. I believe that what makes people more comfortable and confident is familiarity. And when Violet got on the plane and saw a pilot that looked like her, it made her much more comfortable and confident to take that flight. The pilot was actually a rendering of my face, which I think is adorable. Not my face is adorable, but the fact that they did that as a tribute to me was amazing. But the quote that Kenyatta and I are two lights at the end of the tunnel really illuminates, no pun intended, the fact that we are two African American females in a void of thought leadership and innovation. She does children's books. There are not many African American women that does children's books. And I do aviation and aerospace education. I believe the inspiration that comes from both of us and that work was groundbreaking. And special thanks to Kenyatta for just having the vision and the foresight to create that story and memorialize for all the young girls out there what it looks like to do things afraid.
Tell us more about aviation education and your ambitions for that.
For years, aviation and aerospace education has mainly been relegated to mom and pop flight schools or the university. One of the things that we have found was that a lot of young people wanted to get involved in aviation. They just didn't have access or opportunity from diverse backgrounds. So what we saw was young people who had their grandfather flying in World War II, and their dad flew for the military, and their mom was a flight attendant. That didn't happen organically in urban and underserved communities because those aren't the jobs that those kids' parents had. And so through our work in aviation and aerospace education, not only did we bring aviation to a younger audience, but we also created a pipeline and a pathway that was tiered for them to matriculate through programming into the workforce. We literally created a pathway like you would see for youth sports or youth musicians, right? Your child starts playing the instrument at 3, 4, 5 years old. They start taking piano lessons. Then they go and they join the school band. They get a scholarship and they go off and play in the orchestra. Young kid plays soccer, very early age, 3 or 4, soccer league, junior league. And I'm thinking, why can't we do this for STEM? Why can't we make aviation professionals from childhood? And people always ask us, how do you find these students? And my response is, we don't, we make them.
And I suppose, although the path leads to aviation, it could have other destinations too.
Aerostar's work has just been so incredible because we don't just focus on aviation. Again, we focus on the kid. And so we have a lot of young people that have gone through our program that want to be doctors. Well, they can be aeromedicals, they can become an aviation medical examiner, but they also can just go into the medical field. They can go into the military, they can go into the Air Force and serve as a medical professional in the Air Force. Young people want to be lawyers, they can go into aviation law. They had no clue that that was even a thing before our program, but then they also can just go and practice law for United, practice law for Boeing, practice law for a corporation. There is such a misconception about what aviation careers means. And I just prefer to say careers in aviation and aerospace. The industry is so forgiving when it comes to being able to move around and take different pathways. For me, I started out as a pilot, went into aviation consulting, then went into aviation entrepreneurship, then aviation aerospace education and philanthropy. There are a lot of people in different industries that actually do career changes midlife or several times throughout their lives. And aviation is so extraordinary that they can change careers over and over again within the same industry. And that's one of the things that I love about it.
Seems to me you've already had several careers in aviation. Do you have any ambitions left?
I absolutely have ambitions left as far as career aspirations in aviation. I will grow Aero Logistics to a multi-million-dollar aviation consultancy, and we will grow the AeroStar Avion Institute into an international organization serving youth and young adults in aviation and aerospace education across the globe. One of the things that we have found is that there are disadvantaged youth and groups all over the world. And it's not just an American phenomenon that you have underserved communities. And so we have partnered with, and are looking to do more partnerships with organizations that are international, that seek to get their young people engaged in their aviation community. There are airports all over the world. There are aviation jobs all over the world, and we plan to connect young people to those jobs and those careers right there in their own homeland. When we talk about the ambitions that we have for a modern day aviation consultancy, it's not just solving problems for an industry that already exists, but it's also having the forethought and insight to solve the future problems of the industry. Airport restructuring, infrastructure rehabilitation, new terminals, new customer experience for air taxi service, for electrical vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. We are entering a new realm of airports, and the future of aviation also includes the future of airports. An airport on one side, a spaceport, a launch pad on the other side, concierge services and electrical vehicles and aircraft on the other side. I mean, we're really in uncharted territory, and I can foresee that there's going to be a huge need to revamp aviation infrastructure, to retrofit the aircraft of the future.
So do you see aerologistics as a kind of thought leader in terms of defining the future of the industry?
Aerologistics is a thought leader in defining the future of aviation and airports. We have on our team over 150 years of aviation experience, and the leadership has always been innovative and at the forefront of the future of what the industry is becoming. We went through September 11th. We saw the reconfiguring of airports and the need for more safety and security. And now our infrastructure within the United States is basically deplorable and subpar, particularly when it comes to our international airports comparatively to other airports around the world. America doesn't have an airport in the top 10 when it comes to best ranked airports around the globe. And we're looking to change that. We also are looking to revitalize those gems in the community, small local airports that can be an asset to the local shops, retailers, and traveling public to make aviation more affordable for middle-class families.
You called them gems?
Gems.
I like that.
Hidden gems, small community-based airports, not a lot of activity. There's no attraction, no entertainment. They're severely underutilized assets for economic generation. And we need to revitalize those as a part of our American strategy for economic development.
So now as we come towards the end of this interview, if you had a word of advice for the young Tammera,
Ooh.
and all those other young Tammeras out there, what would it be?
There were so many times that I questioned if I was worthy, if I really was as smart as my teacher said I was, if I really was as confident as I put on or appeared. A lot of times I questioned, am I really as mean as people say that I am? And the answer was no. Because if I was a young boy, they would have told me I was a great leader. If I was a young boy, they would have told me I was the best and the brightest. If I was a young boy, they would have told me that the world was mine and every opportunity would be laid out before me. All I had to do was work hard. And because I was a girl, I never got that. I got, you're too pretty to laugh that loud. And you have a tremendous amount of self-confidence, but your colleagues are reacting negatively to that. I got, are you sure you're in the right place? Because this is the airport. I got, you really don't have to dress up at work every day. Do you need that much attention? All the men wore suits, but they expected me to wear a dress like the ladies. And so I would tell young Tammera that she was right. She was who she thought she was. And those people that affirmed me, that encouraged me and supported me, they knew that I was right. I just didn't know until now.
Well, that's a lovely note on which to celebrate International Women's Day. Thank you, Tammera.
Thank you, Patrick.
Tammera, that brings us to the end of this interview, but not to the end of our time together. I've been asked by the AeroTime Global Executive Committee to thank you for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. The committee would like to acknowledge your dedication, perseverance, and contribution to promoting equal opportunities in the aviation sector, and for everything you do to encourage so many people across all groups, much of which we have heard about during the interview. And I'm sure everyone listening will be as impressed and inspired as I am. Now, Tammera, it gives me very great pleasure to present you with the AeroTime Aviation Achievement Award.
What?
This award is made by the Global Executive Committee of AeroTime.
Wow.
Mercedes, thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, AeroTime. This is incredible. Wow.
I will now read the citation. Presented to Tammera L Holmes in recognition of her dedication and commitment to the aviation sector, for her focus on promoting diversity and inclusion through philanthropy in aviation and aerospace education, for passionately acting as a role model for young people, women, African Americans, and underrepresented groups, to pursue STEM subjects and to join the aviation industry. The AeroTime Global Executive Committee recognizes the positive influence of these efforts and the significance of their impact in the aviation industry and its people, both today and into the future.
Woo.
Congratulations, Tammera. You really are an inspiration, and I'm honored to have had the opportunity to make this presentation to you.
Thank you, Patrick. Wow.
Applause. That brings us to the end of this AeroTime interview. Thank you for joining us. My name is Patrick Jeffson, and you've been watching AeroTime. Goodbye.